Apache sisters sold like cattle. Lonely cowboy who bought them said, "I'll take you home." Ethan Cole's boots scraped across the weathered porch boards as he settled into the chair that had molded to his form over 3 long years. The Arizona Territory sunset painted the distant mountains purple, a sight his Sarah would have called heaven sent. He lifted the whiskey bottle in a silent toast to her photograph, perched on the small table beside him. "Made it through another day, darlin'." The ranch was quiet, save for cattle lowing in the distance and the soft nickering of his horse. "Sergeant," from the corral. Too quiet. He'd gotten used to it, or so he told himself. But nights like this made the silence press in like a physical weight. His supplies had dwindled to nearly nothing. Town meant people. Questions. Sidelong glances at the former cavalry officer who'd turned his back on the army. But a man couldn't live on memories and pride. The next morning, Ethan rode into Copper Springs with his hat pulled low. He'd get his supplies and be gone before noon. The commotion in the town square changed that plan. A crowd had gathered around the auction block, but it wasn't livestock being sold. 2 Apache women stood with wrists bound, one tall and proud despite the bruises on her face, the other younger and visibly trembling. "Finest Apache squaws you'll find," barked the auctioneer. A man Ethan recognized instantly, Jefferson Wade, former Army scout, his face bearing the scar that slashed from temple to jaw. "This one's trained for housework," he said, shoving the younger girl forward. "And this one," he yanked the chain binding the older woman, "just needs a firm hand to break her spirit." The older woman's eyes met Ethan's, defiant and burning with a dignity that the filthy dress and bound hands couldn't diminish. $30, called a miner with yellow teeth. 40, countered the blacksmith. Wade spotted Ethan at the edge of the crowd, and his mouth twisted. "Well, if it ain't Lieutenant Cole, come to see what real Indian fighters do with savages." Ethan's hand instinctively moved toward the revolver at his hip. The scar on Wade's face had been his parting gift after Ethan reported him for massacring a peaceful Apache camp. $100, Ethan said, his voice carrying across the suddenly hushed crowd. Wade's eyes narrowed. $150. $300. Almost everything Ethan had saved. The crowd murmured. Wade's jaw tightened, but greed won out over pride. Sold to the Indian lover. Ethan approached the block, coins clinking in the leather pouch he tossed to Wade. The sister's eyes tracked his every move. "I'll take you home," Ethan said in halting Apache, a language he'd picked up during his scouting days. He didn't know if they had a home left to return to, but he knew they didn't belong here. As he led them to his wagon, Wade called after him. "They killed good soldiers. Cole, you're harboring murderers." Ethan felt the weight of hostile stares as he helped the women into his wagon. In the distance, a rider broke away from town, heading east. Someone was already spreading word. Nasha watched the white man's hands as he untied their bonds. Strong hands, calloused from work, but they moved with unexpected gentleness. She remained tense, ready to fight despite her exhaustion. The journey from town had passed in wary silence. "This is yours," he said in broken Apache, gesturing to a small cabin separate from the main house. "Safe here." Taluta swayed beside her, feverish from the infected cut on her arm. The white man noticed, his brow furrowing. "She needs medicine," he said, switching to English. Nasha understood enough to respond. "No white medicine." He disappeared into the main house and returned with a worn leather bag. Not white medicine, Apache. He opened it to reveal familiar herbs and roots, medicine stolen from her people, but medicine that might save Taluta. Inside the cabin, Nasha found clean blankets, a stove, and a woman's touches, curtains, a rag rug, a rocking chair. A white woman had lived here once. Night fell. Taluta's fever worsened. Nasha prepared poultices from the medicine bag, singing healing songs beneath her breath. The white man, Ethan. He'd called himself, brought water and food, then retreated. Near midnight, Taluta thrashed in delirium. Mother Ethan appeared in the doorway. "Can I help?" Nasha hesitated, then nodded. Together, they worked through the night, Ethan following her instructions without question. Dawn found Taluta's fever broken, her breathing steady. As Nasha stepped outside to wash, her foot struck something in the tall grass, her knife, the one Wade had taken weeks ago. She picked it up, turning to find Ethan watching from the porch. "You might need this," he said quietly. "Just not on me, I hope." The next day, Nasha noticed Ethan's prize stallion favoring its left foreleg, while he repaired a fence line. She gathered plants from the creek bed and prepared a poultice. The horse's leg was hot with infection when she approached. "Easy," she murmured in Apache. "I bring no harm." Ethan returned to find her smoothing the medicine onto the animal's leg, binding it with strips of cloth. He watched silently, then nodded in thanks. That night, Nasha woke to shouts from the main house. Through the window, she saw Ethan thrashing in his sleep on the porch where he'd been keeping watch. "No stand down." The words meant little to her, but the anguish in his voice needed no translation. This man carried ghosts, too. She returned to her pallet beside Taluta, the knife beneath her pillow untouched. Morning brought an unspoken truce. Ethan avoided her eyes when he brought fresh water, embarrassed by his nightmares, but when their fingers brushed as she took the bucket, neither pulled away too quickly. Dust rose on the horizon, a single rider approaching. Ethan reached for his rifle, positioned it casually against the porch post, and continued mending harness leather. He'd been expecting company since yesterday. "Morning, Bill," he called as the neighboring rancher dismounted. "Coffee's hot." "Don't mind if I do." Bill Henderson removed his hat, casting furtive glances toward the cabin where Nasha was grinding corn. "Heard you caused quite a stir in town." Ethan poured coffee into a tin cup. "Just doing some shopping." "Shopping?" Bill snorted. "That what you call buying 2 Apache women from Wade?" "That what you call women." "Shopping items?" Ethan's voice remained even, but his eyes hardened. Bill shifted uncomfortably. "Didn't mean it like that, but folks are talking. Ethan, Wade's telling anyone who'll listen that you're harboring murderers. And you rode all this way to warn me?" "Partly." Bill sipped his coffee. "Partly to see for myself. These are dangerous times for a man living alone. I appreciate the concern." After Bill left, Ethan found Nasha watching him from the garden patch. Taluta had recovered enough to help her sister, and together they'd transformed the neglected soil into neat rows. "He friend?" Nasha asked in halting English. "Neighbor," Ethan corrected. "Not enemy, not friend." Nasha nodded, understanding the distinction. She pointed to the cattle in the distance. "Need water soon. Creek drying." Ethan hadn't noticed, but she was right. He gestured for her to follow, and they walked to the eastern pasture. To his surprise, Nasha demonstrated considerable knowledge of livestock. When a nervous heifer balked at crossing the creek bed, she approached with confidence. Speaking low in Apache, the animal followed without protest. "You've worked with cattle before," Ethan said, impressed. Through Taluta's improving translations, Nasha explained that her people had adopted some ranching ways in recent years, adapting to the changing lands. That evening, 3 local men rode up, ostensibly to borrow tools. Their eyes lingered on the cabin. "Heard you got yourself some house help," one remarked. "I have guests," Ethan replied firmly. "Not servants, not prisoners. Any man who says different answers to me." After they departed, Ethan checked his ammunition supply. He'd made his position clear. There would be consequences. At sunset, Taluta discovered something lodged in a fence post, an arrow with distinctive markings. Not a weapon, but a message. Nasha examined it, her expression unreadable. "Apache scouts," she finally said, watching. "Friendly?" Ethan asked. Nasha turned the arrow in her hands. Not enemy, not friend. Ethan recognized his own words from earlier, and despite everything, he smiled. Nasha's lips curved slightly in return, the first hint of warmth he'd seen from her. As darkness fell, Ethan kept his rifle closer. They were being watched from all sides now. Nasha fed another stick to the fire, watching flames lick at the dry wood. Across from her, Ethan cleaned his rifle with practiced movements. The weapon that had killed so many of her people now stood between them and danger. 3 days had passed since the arrow's discovery. Taluta sat nearby, strength returning to her thin frame. The white man had given them food, shelter, and something unexpected: respect. "Ask him why," Nasha said to her sister in Apache. "Why did he buy us?" Taluta translated, her English improving daily. Ethan's hands stilled on the rifle. "I know what it's like to be treated as less than human," he said simply. "Through Taluta." Nasha pressed further. "You were soldier. You fought Apache." Ethan set the rifle aside, his eyes reflecting firelight. "Yes, but I left when I saw what men like Wade were doing, attacking peaceful camps, women, children." He looked directly at Nasha. "I reported him. That's why he hates me." Before Nasha could respond, hoofbeats approached. Ethan moved quickly, positioning himself between the women and the approaching rider. A uniformed cavalry officer dismounted, his insignia marking him as a captain. "Cole," he called. "Been a while." "Captain Blackwood," Ethan acknowledged stiffly. "What brings you to my property?" "Official business." Blackwood's gaze drifted to the sisters. "I see the rumors are true." Inside, over coffee, Ethan offered more out of protocol than hospitality. Blackwood delivered his news. All Apaches were being relocated to the San Carlos Reservation. Any not complying would be considered hostile. "I'm giving you 1 week, Cole," Blackwood said, "for old time's sake. Turn them in voluntarily, or I return with a full patrol." After he departed, Nasha could contain her questions no longer. Through Taluta, she told her full story: their peaceful band massacred by raiders posing as army scouts, their parents killed, their capture and separation. "My husband," she said, the words painful even in Apache. 1 month married when taken, he fought, maybe lives still. She described a warrior who had sworn to lead resistance fighters across the Mexican border. Ethan listened intently, then shared what he knew: rumors of Apache bands escaping south, beyond army jurisdiction. "Mexico is dangerous," he warned, "but San Carlos is death, slow death." Dawn found Taluta outside gathering eggs. Her scream brought Ethan and Nasha running. Behind the chicken coop, fresh boot prints circled the property, not Apache moccasins, white man's boots. "Wade," Ethan growled. "He watches," Taluta whispered, "while we slept." That night, they moved all sleeping pallets into the main house. As Nasha spread blankets before the hearth, she noticed a small object Ethan quickly tucked away, a child's wooden horse, roughly carved. "You had child?" she asked directly in broken English. Pain flashed across his face. "Daughter. Fever took her. And my wife." In that moment, Nasha understood what truly haunted this man's dreams, not just war, but loss. Like her, he carried ghosts, unlike Wade, whose eyes held only cruelty. Ethan's held sorrow. It was the difference between a man who chose violence and one who had violence thrust upon him. Nasha nodded once. Decision made. "We fight together now." The morning after Blackwood's ultimatum dawned clear and cool. Ethan saddled 2 horses before sunrise, his decision made during a sleepless night. "We need to know if your people are still out there," he told Nasha, "if there's a safe path to Mexico." Toluta would stay behind, watching for Wade's return. Nasha mounted with practiced ease, her body remembering the freedom of horseback despite months of captivity. They rode south, following game trails that would hide their tracks. By midday, they reached the foothills. Nasha dismounted at a seemingly random spot, kneeling to examine faint markings on a rock. She motioned Ethan closer. "Apache signs," she explained. 2 moons passed, many people, going south. Ethan was impressed. "I was a scout for years and never would have seen that." They continued deeper into Apache territory, Ethan increasingly aware he was trusting Nasha with his life. She could lead him into an ambush, take revenge for her people's suffering. Instead, she pointed out water sources and warned of unstable ground. They made camp in a sheltered canyon, sharing dried meat and cornmeal cakes Toluta had prepared. As darkness fell, Nasha began teaching Ethan proper Apache pronunciation. He was a quick student. "Why did you stay?" he asked. "You could have escaped days ago." Nasha considered her answer carefully. "Toluta too weak." Then she gestured at the vast territory. "No safe place. White soldiers everywhere. And now? Now we have common enemy." Thunder rumbled in the distance. Nasha glanced up at gathering clouds. "Rain comes. Big storm." They reached the ranch the following afternoon to find Toluta agitated. Wade and 2 men had circled the property but hadn't approached. More troubling, 3 cattle lay dead near the creek. "Poisoned water," Ethan confirmed after examination. That evening, he brought out his second rifle and began teaching the sisters to shoot. Nasha proved a natural marksman, her aim deadly accurate. When Ethan expressed surprise, she smiled grimly. Apache women fight too, not just men. They fortified the ranch house, boarding windows and creating firing positions. Ethan showed them how to make simple traps to slow attackers. In return, Nasha demonstrated Apache fighting techniques, silent movement, using terrain for concealment. As night fell, thunder shook the house. Rain lashed against the roof as Ethan checked the horses in the barn. Nasha joined him, helping to calm Sargent as lightning spooked the animals. "Your wife," she said suddenly. "Tell me her name." "Sarah," Ethan replied, surprised by the question. "Oh, you loved her much. More than my own life." Nasha nodded, understanding. "My husband, Nayati, was warrior, good man." Her eyes met Ethan's in the lantern light. "Hard to find good men." Lightning flashed again, illuminating their faces inches apart. Neither could later say who moved first, but in the crash of thunder that followed, their lips met, tentative, then certain. a connection forged in shared loss and unexpected respect. They separated at a frightened whinny from the horses. Reality crashed back. They were preparing for war. Not romance, but something had changed, something neither could retreat from. Dawn broke with unnatural quiet. Birds that usually announced the morning remained silent. Ethan stood at the window, coffee cooling in his hand, senses alert to the wrongness in the air. Behind him, Nasha loaded rifles while Taluta distributed ammunition pouches they'd prepared the night before. Their kiss remained unspoken between them, yet it had somehow sealed their alliance more surely than words. The first shot shattered the kitchen window. "Down!" Ethan shouted, diving for cover as glass exploded inward. 6 riders emerged from the tree line, Wade at their center. They split into pairs, circling the property. "Cole." Ethan met Nasha's eyes. She nodded once, moving to her designated position. "Come and get them yourself." "Wade," Ethan called back. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions. Nasha returned fire through a narrow gap in the boarded windows, her aim forcing Wade's men to retreat for better cover. Taluta reloaded weapons with remarkable speed. One rider broke from the group. Racing toward the barn with a burning torch, Ethan's shot missed, and flames erupted along the wooden structure. "The horses," Taluta cried, while Nasha provided covering fire. Ethan and Taluta raced to free the animals. They'd barely reached the barn doors when a bullet caught Ethan in the shoulder, spinning him against the wall. Nasha appeared at his side as if materialized from the smoke, firing with deadly precision at the attacker. The man fell from his horse, motionless. "Get the horses," she ordered Taluta, then dragged Ethan toward the creek bed where they'd prepared an escape route. Taluta appeared with Sergeant and one other horse. The barn collapsed behind her, flames reaching skyward. "We ride now," Nasha decided, binding Ethan's wound with strips torn from her dress. Too many, bad position. Blood soaked through the makeshift bandage as they mounted, Ethan grimacing with each movement. They fled south, toward the canyon where they'd scouted. Behind them, Wade's men regrouped for pursuit. "Leaving blood trail," Ethan muttered, fighting dizziness. Nasha's face was grim. "I know place. Deep canyon." Good defense. They reached the narrow passage by midday, Ethan barely conscious in the saddle. As Nasha helped him dismount, riders appeared on the ridge above them, not Wade's men, but cavalry uniforms. Captain Blackwood had arrived early. "Trap," Taluta whispered, caught between Wade's vengeance and Blackwood's duty. They retreated deeper into the canyon. Nasha applied a poultice to Ethan's wound, her touch gentle despite their desperate situation. "Why help me?" Ethan asked through pain-gritted teeth. "Could escape alone." Nasha's eyes held his, not alone anymore. The sound of approaching horses echoed off canyon walls. Nasha positioned Ethan behind cover, then showed Taluta how to create false trails. Wade's voice bounced between rock faces. "I know you're here." "Cole." What followed was a deadly game of cat and mouse through the canyon labyrinth. Taluta used Apache signaling, reflected light, disturbed stones to confuse their pursuers. Nasha led them through passages too narrow for horses, forcing their hunters to proceed on foot. When Wade finally cornered them against a sheer wall, it was Blackwood who appeared behind him. "That's enough. Wade," the captain ordered. Rifle raised, Wade turned, sneering. "These are hostiles. Captain, I'm doing your job." "By massacring peaceful bands for profit?" Blackwood's voice was cold. "Cole reported you years ago. I didn't believe him then. I do now." In the moment of distraction, Wade lunged for Toluta. Nasha moved with lightning speed. The knife Ethan had returned to her, finding its mark in Wade's throat. Justice. 3 years delayed. Sunlight streamed through the newly repaired window, falling across Ethan's shoulder where Nasha changed the bandage. 3 weeks had passed since the canyon confrontation. The wound was healing clean, thanks to her medicine and care. "You have good hands," he murmured, watching her work. "You have strong heart," she replied, securing the bandage. Most white men would die from such wound. Outside, Toluta's laughter mingled with deeper voices. Bill Henderson's son Thomas helping rebuild the barn. The young man had appeared days after their return, offering assistance and casting shy glances at Toluta. Blackwood had surprised them all. After witnessing Wade's brutality and the sisters' courage, he'd provided papers identifying them as civilized Indians, exempt from relocation orders, a legal fiction that might save their lives. Not perfect protection, he'd warned, but it buys time. The ranch was slowly recovering. Neighbors who'd once viewed Ethan with suspicion now brought supplies, impressed by the stand he'd taken against Wade, who'd terrorized many in the territory. As Nasha finished with the bandage, Ethan caught her hand. "There's something I've been meaning to give you." From his pocket, he withdrew a small silver locket, Sarah's most treasured possession. "I can't replace what you've lost," he said quietly, "but I want you to have this." Sarah would have wanted it. Nasha hesitated, understanding the significance. "Your wife's spirit would approve." Ethan smiled. She never believed in hatred. A rider approached, interrupting the moment, not cavalry or neighbor, but an Apache scout Nasha recognized. They spoke rapidly in their language, the scout gesturing southward. Ethan waited until the man departed before asking, "What news?" Nasha's face was composed, but her eyes held fresh grief. "Nayati, my husband, dead, fighting soldiers near border." Ethan said nothing, simply stood beside her as she faced the mountains, performing a silent prayer for her husband's spirit. He understood this grief, its depth and weight. The following weeks unfolded in unexpected harmony. Nasha observed the proper mourning period, which Ethan respected without question. They worked side by side, rebuilding what Wade had destroyed, creating something new in the process. Toluta blossomed, her English becoming fluent as Thomas taught her to read from Sarah's books. In return, she shared Apache stories and medicines with neighboring ranchers, slowly building bridges. One evening, as summer heat gave way to cooler air, Ethan found Nasha by the creek, washing her hair in the traditional Apache way for the first time since her capture. "Mourning period is complete," she said simply. Ethan nodded, understanding what remained unspoken between them. Their marriage the following spring combined both traditions. Apache blessing ceremony, followed by words from Henderson's dog-eared Bible. Blackwood attended, bringing news of policy changes that might eventually allow displaced Apaches to return to ancestral lands. 1 year later, Ethan stood on the porch at sunset, watching Nasha in the garden, her belly swollen with their child. Toluta and Thomas approached from the neighboring ranch, hands intertwined. A rider appeared on the horizon, Blackwood again, but this time not alone. Behind him, a family with Apache features rode cautiously. "Refugees," Nasha said, joining Ethan on the porch, escaping San Carlos. Ethan squeezed her hand. "Then they've come to the right place." Together they walked out to meet them, offering what they had once separately lacked but now shared in abundance: a home.